Hi everyone, welcome to this video for the Eduqas GCSE English Language. This is paper 1, we're looking at the how question. This is from an old exam paper. If you want to look at the exam paper, if you just type in Education English Megan, you should be able to find it. So in the reading exam for paper 1, we've got 5 questions. One is the easy information retrieval. We've got an impressions question. We've got 2 how questions. And we've got the evaluation at the end, which is, do you agree? To be perfectly honest, the first question is the easy one. All the other 4, you're looking at the same thing. You're trying to figure out why a writer has chosen certain words. So writer's intent, writer's technique. Basically, if it's a 5-mark question, you should be spending about 5 minutes on it and writing 3 or 4 quotes. If it's a 10-mark question, 13 minutes, 5 to 8 quotes. I've put the amount of quotes on this screen here. However, really, it's all about time. So however many quotes you do in the allotted time, you need to move on to the next question and make sure you finish the exam. Like I said, here are the rough timings. If you have extra time, you could add on a couple of minutes for each one. But it's really about how much you do. So if after 13 minutes of question 3 and you've just done 1 quote, you don't hang around on question 3 till you've done 5 quotes. You move on to the next question, and if you have time, you go back. You must time manage, so good exam technique would be to look at the clock before starting each question so you know how long you've got. Also, more exam technique would be to draw a box around lines stated. So for example, in this exam, if it says lines 1 to 11, put a little box around lines 1 to 11, then you know your answer must come from within there. Leave a 1-line gap between each quote or PE to make it nice and clear for the examiner. If the examiner can't read what you're putting, you won't get a mark for it. Start a new page for each question. You can always go back and do more. And remember, put quotation marks around every quote. If the examiner doesn't know if it's a quote, you might not get a mark. So this is how I would do it. Even though there's loads of room, give yourself every question, start a new page, and make it nice and clear for the examiner. Okay, so the how questions then. There are 2 how questions in the paper 1 exam. They can be on questions 2, 3 and 4. They will be worth 5 or 10 marks. Sometimes, instead of being a how question, it will say thoughts and feelings about some aspect of the text. If you get that, you're basically answering it the same way. It's more about your opinions of the character. So the examiner's report has said about the reading exam that grade 3 students, what they do wrong is there's too much time spent on low mark questions. More quotes are needed across the whole text. Far too much feature spotting, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. And their advice would be to write less explanation and do more quotes. So, like I said, too much time spent on low mark questions. This is a 5-mark question, and the student wrote this much, and that's a 10-mark question, and that's what the student wrote. So that's just not logical, is it? If the one on the left is worth 5 marks and the student is almost writing double than the one for 10 marks, something's gone wrong. So you've got to make sure you time manage. If it's a 5-mark question, 5 minutes, 10-mark question, 13 minutes, and your word count should reflect that. Like I said, we need more quotes needed across the whole text. So what sometimes students do wrong is they will look at a passage and they will only talk about quotes from 3 lines of a 20-line passage. You've got to make sure you take quotes from throughout the extract. Far too much feature spotting. So what I mean by this is students telling me what the word class is. So they will say that's a simile, that's alliteration, that's a metaphor. You will not get any marks for just saying that's alliteration. That is personification. If you say why the writer has used it and the effect, then you will get marks. Well, what students tend to do is they pick out a word, say it's a simile, and think that's enough. It's much easier just to say, use the word. So, for example, if I said the word demolish shows the power of the beast, yeah. What tends to happen as well is the metaphor, okay? So this one here was actually a simile. It said faster than a pistol at a gunfight. So this person's actually got it wrong. And that's what happens quite a lot, where this student, if they wouldn't have put it to metaphor and mucked it up, they probably would have got a mark. If they would have said the phrase cameras are listed faster than a pistol at a gunfight, they would have got the mark. But because it's a simile and they've said it's the metaphor, they're not going to get a mark because it's confusing for the examiner. Okay, so like I said earlier as well, write less explanation and a lot of quotes. So it's much better to write a little about a lot of quotes than it is to write a lot about a small number of quotes. So what I mean by that here is if you look at the student's work, which is 3, 6, almost like 15 to 20 lines, and they've only done one quote. So they've done one quote, they've explained that, they might have explained it well, but the examiner wants quotes. What tends to happen is after one or two sentences of an explanation is that you just ramble and repeat your point. So this is what we don't want, and this is what we want. So this person has done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They've done 5 quotes, they've left a line under the quote, so the examiner, it's nice and clear for the examiner. They've explained these quote really concisely, and they've moved on to the next point. So that's what we don't want on the left, and that's what we want on the right. The head of the exam board has said plenty of quotes gives a student high marks. So use that. They want you to write lots of quotes and explain them in short ways. And why do we want a lot of quotes? Well, we get marks. So this person, these two people here, these two students, I would say they were just as good in terms of how good they were at English with their ability. However, the person on the left hasn't got good exam technique because they've only put 2 quotes. But the person on the right, even though they're just as good as the person on the left, they've got better exam technique, and they've understood that all the examiner wants is lots of quotes throughout the text and then explained in a quick and subtle way. There you go. 10 marks, 10 quotes. So remember again, if it's a 5-mark question, 3 to 5 quotes in 5 to 6 minutes. If it's a 10-mark question, 5 to 10 quotes, 13 minutes. But that's in an ideal world, but really just do as many 1 or 2 word quotes as you can in the time. So if it's a 5-mark question, as many as you can do in 5 minutes. If it's a 10-mark question, as many quotes as you can do in 13. So this question is all about zooming in on keywords and thinking, why has the writer used them? So if I read on something, he walked down the stairs, that's not telling me much about the character. But if the writer has decided to change that to he crept down the stairs, that's changed. So by the writer changing the word, they've changed the way the man is presented. So what is the writer trying to say with the word crept? So here's he's walking, but if we change that verb to he crept down the stairs, it might mean the man is trying to be quiet, that the man is hiding. Yeah? So an example PE would be the word crept suggests the man is trying to walk down quietly or not to be noticed at all. Because what I've done as a student is I've zoomed into the word crept, I've looking at the connotations, and I've explained why the writer has decided to use that word over any other word. Okay, so when we get into the exam, I'm going to show you a real exam paper now. They will always give you a bit of context on what the story is about. So this exam paper was a passage about Megan, a young woman from a remote area of Canada who comes to London for the first time to visit a friend. There's the exam. We're just looking at lines 24 to 38. The question is, Megan doesn't enjoy the train journey into London. How does the writer show this? 10 marks. So I'll read the extract, and while I read it, think to yourself, how does it show that she's not enjoying it? So, the train had been largely empty when they had left Gatwick, but every few minutes it would stop at a grimy station to collect more passengers. By the time it reached Victoria Station, it was like a cattle car. People wedged themselves into seats or stood up hard against each other, holding onto the luggage racks, rocking back and forth with the movement of the train. Nobody spoke. A fat man in a wet coat squeezed himself into the seat beside her, his legs sticking out sideways into the aisle. The train slowed to a crawl, and people began to collect their belongings. The instant it stopped, people surged towards a door. Megan stepped onto the platform and was swallowed instantly by a churning mass of people. She had never seen so many people, never imagined such numbers. It took her breath away. But what's worse was the noise. It was like an assault. She could feel trains groaning to a halt, other trains rumbling out, doors slamming, whistles shrieking, announcements booming out of loudspeakers. The station was colossal. It was like a vast, echoing cavern. Megan stood stunned and breathless, and then someone bumped into her hard and gave her an exasperated look. So you should be looking for 6 to 10 quotes that show Megan is not enjoying the train journey. First of all, it's described as grimy, so it gives you the impression the station is really dirty and unhygienic. A cattle car suggests that it's very busy and packed. She can't move. It's really uncomfortable. And wedged exaggerates and emphasises that point. If you wedge yourself in somewhere, it's like you can't quite get in. It's very tight. Nobody spoke, which shows the atmosphere is unfriendly. People surged towards the door. swallowed instantly by a churning mass of people. So it's almost like this. We get the impression that Megan's quite a sort of quiet and introverted character. She's a bit nervous. She's never been in England, a big place before. We've already been told she lives in a remote area, so a quiet area. So she's swallowed instantly. So it's almost like she disappears into a huge amount of people who are really walking around really quickly. They said the noise was like an assault. So let's zoom into a few of these. So to get a grade 5 and above, use a quote and say how it shows Megan didn't enjoy the journey. 1 or 2 sentences per explanation per quote. No waffle along PEs. So we want 8 or 9 points with quotes as opposed to 2 huge PEs with massive descriptions. So here's a few. First quote is, the station was grimy. Why does this show that Megan doesn't like it? Well, I put, the writer makes the station seem unpleasant and dirty for Megan by describing it as a grimy. So I've always been that human dictionary. What does grimy mean? Well, it means horrible, unhygienic, and I've put that into my PE. So this student gives a quote and explains why it shows Megan's feelings about the train journey. Instead of grimy, if it would have said the station was busy or the station was pleasant, that would have given the reader a totally different impression, and we would think about the train station in a completely different way. It's described as grimy, so if you look at this picture, we're sort of thinking it's going to be a bit like this. Another one is, why does it seem unpleasant? Well, Megan was there and it said that nobody spoke. So the writer says nobody spoke, and this suggests that the train and the people on it seem unfriendly and cold. Another one thing is about the station is that it was so loud that it was almost like an assault. So if you think about an assault, think about why the writer has used that simile. What are they trying to get over? They're not just trying to get across it was loud. They're almost trying to say that it was hurting her physically. What is an assault? It's someone hitting you, isn't it? So that's what they're saying. They're saying the noise was so loud in the train station, it almost felt like someone was actually hitting her with it. Okay, another one is they describe the train as a cattle car. The writer makes the station seem unpleasant for Megan by describing the train as a cattle car. This tells the reader that it was very busy and lacking any comfort. So if you look at this GIF here, that's how it feels like you're being packed in almost like animals. If you wanted to, you could actually zoom in a little bit on cattle and say it feels like the people on the train almost been treated like animals, where they get no food or drink and they're all packed in. And I've also put another quote in, Wedge emphasises the same point. So even though I'm making the same point, remember the examiner wants quotes, so I've almost got 2 quotes here in one explanation. Let's go through one more. Another one, it says, swallowed instantly by a churning mass of people. And in this explanation, I'm going to zoom into swallowed, instantly, churning, and mass. So I've put, the writer makes the station seem unpleasant for Megan by describing her as being swallowed instantly by a churning mass of people. This tells the reader that Megan disappeared into a crowd of people who were moving vigorously. So that's what churning means. It makes, and what's the effect on the reader? It makes Megan seem helpless and vulnerable. Yeah. So if you imagine this, she comes from a remote part of Canada. She walks out and she's almost been swarmed up and disappears instantly. So remember, after 15 minutes or so, you should try to do as many here. I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there's about 11 or 12 quotes there. You should be looking from like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. And remember, for the reading exam, don't spend a lot of time on the low mark questions. More quotes needed for the 10 mark questions. Don't tell me something is a metaphor or simile. Just say the quotes and write a nice explanation. And we want you talking about loads of quotes with a little explanation for each. I hope this has been some use to you.